Hello, BookTube. So start with a fusillade of apologies here. Apologies that I didn't make a video or any videos yesterday. Apologies for any problems with the video or the sound in this video. I'm using a different camera. Also apologies for the fact that I probably look and sound like crap on a popsicle stick. That is an accurate description. But I didn't want to go another day without talking to you, especially since I'm part of Buddy Read with Matthew at Mayberry Book Club. We're turning the name of his channel into a reality and doing a little book club for two. We've had a lot of fun in the read-alongs that we've been doing so far, and so we're just continuing. And we're in June. He is joining me on a read-along that existed long before he was born. In fact, I would be willing to guess that this particular read-along existed when his parents were little babies crawling across the floor. Every June, I reread Homer's Iliad. And every August, I reread Homer's Odyssey. And for this June, Matthew decided that he was okay with reading the Iliad again in June. So that's what we're doing. 6 books of the Iliad every week. And we're on week 2. I'm late. I'm late with my video, but I'm doing that today. We chose to do the Robert Fitzgerald translation, which for a long time was the English language translation that I would just automatically recommend to people who wanted to read this book. I tend now to go a little bit more towards the Fagles translation because it's readable. Certainly, it's perfectly okay as a translation, and also because it has the invaluable introductions and better maps. In fact, the Fitzgerald Iliad hardly has maps at all. It hardly has any support for you at all, which might have been good 60 years ago, but is more and more needed. That support is more and more needed now. But nevertheless, this translation is still my favorite into English. It has a weird, stiff, incantatory beauty to it that was very much a conscious decision on Fitzgerald's part. And today we're reading books 7 to 13, book 7 to 14 of the Iliad, which takes place, let's remember, late in the war, unbeknownst to any of the Greeks or the Trojans in this poem. The war doesn't have much longer to go, and they've been at it a long time. And increasingly, as you read the Iliad, you realize that this is a slight writer's oversight or overconvenience on the part of Homer. Because if this is just 1 year out of the war, then there would be no one left alive when this poem starts. The all of the major characters are wounded severely in the course of just the weeks that this bit covers, and lots of other stuff happens too, to the point where when you're reading, if you're reading it for the first time, you'll notice an aspect that Matthew has mentioned a couple of times. I'll leave a link to his second video on our Iliad read-along, which is that the gods run rampant on the battlefield. They are personally involved. They aren't disembodied sort of 20th century Christian deities. They are essentially big superhuman beings and have all the partisan loves and hates of human beings, and often go onto the battlefield and kill humans themselves. And the more you read this and thrill to it, the books that we're reading today are absolutely thrilling, especially in their variety. The more you get, if you step back, you think, okay, well, what's so special about this year? Because something would have to be special about this year. If the Iliad had gone on like this, it wouldn't have lasted for 8 or 9 years. It would have been over one way or another long before now. Not many readers address that question. I think that's probably understandable. It tends to take the fun out of things, and there's a lot of fun in these chapters. A lot of questionable stuff as well. In his video, Matthew mentions that a little detail of Homer that I very much like. I imitated it in my own novel, which retells the Trojan War, called Troy War, and that is that Homer almost always refuses to let death be anonymous. He tells you a little bit about each person that's getting a javelin in the throat, or a javelin straight through the heart, or having their head stove in, or whatever. It's not a question. It's not a similar thing to, for instance, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, yelling Elendil and leaping onto a crowd of orcs that he's going to just unceremoniously kill. We don't learn anything about those orcs. But in the Iliad, we do. In the Iliad, you learn something about the person right before they bite the dust, right before their spirit goes down into darkness. And it's usually a tellingly chosen little detail that is both an ironic commentary on their death and also an intensely humanizing thing. Very well done. I tried to do the same thing in Troy War, although I have my share of hugely anonymous swaths of death. uh, that's one of the elements here. Another element that you, when you're reading the first 6 books of the Iliad for the first time, you're thinking, well, okay, these gods can materialize out of nowhere. They're the martial ones, Mars or Minerva, are completely unopposable. For Pete's sakes, Neptune takes the field here. He's one of the most powerful gods in the pantheon. So if that's true, then this is really a fight between the gods over who just likes Troy more or less, who gets better sacrifices from the Greeks, but not really a question of what the humans do. If these superpowered, basically bipedal thermonuclear reactors are on the battlefield, then it's interesting to read. It's definitely interesting to read, but I believe that probably the complex of writers involved in becoming Homer understood that it leaches a little of the human pathos out of the story, and that comes to a head in the books that we're reading today, where Jupiter, Zeus, the king of the gods, tells the other gods, I don't want any more interfering. I don't want anybody else running rampant down on the battlefield. And he is not a serene, pure being. He is basically a tough guy human, only with unbelievable cosmic power. And he tells the other gods, I have made my ruling, and if you cross me, you'll be sorry, because I'm more powerful than all of you put together. So that's just the way it's going to be. If I make this edict, then it is true. He has been fighting with his sister and wife, Juno, or Hera, for a long time. They are old adversaries. There's not much in the way of love there. But she knows perfectly well the gigantic risk of brooking his will. And so does his favorite child, Athena, the goddess Athena, who was the goddess of war and also the goddess of wisdom, and is one of the most intriguing divine characters in the poem. They both simper right away, as do all the other gods, and say, no one's opposing you, please don't get angry, don't do that. But nevertheless, as the fighting continues in the books that we're seeing, the temptation becomes too much for Juno and Minerva, and they decide to harness their horses, because gods or not, they still need a chariot to get somewhere, except they don't, because plenty of times divine beings in the Iliad stride down whole mountainsides on their own, or simply fly from one place to another. But these two need a chariot. But one way or another, it's a device. It's a narrative device that allows delay. I don't know how many of you are familiar with horseback riding, but you don't just run out into the stable and hop on a horse. You have to get ready. You have to harness the horse. You have to prepare the animal, and also if you're bringing along a chariot, a small chariot, then that has to be harnessed too. Everything has to be checked over. I guess the gods have to do that as well as humans do, and that's long enough for Jupiter to get the word that these two very prominent immortals intend to defy him. And there's a wonderful moment. It's a moment that happens a couple of times in the Iliad. I always love it. Jupiter almost never. That scene in the council, on the peak of Olympus is one thing, but when Jupiter is giving an edict to another god, he usually sends a messenger to do it rather than do it himself. And the messengers often work in a bit of their own personality. They're supposed to repeat verbatim what they're told, but they don't often do that. And I love that. Absolutely love that. And I want to read you the scene where that happens, where Jupiter notices that he's about to be disobeyed. Or Zeus notices, sorry. Once again, I apologize. I learned all of this at the DNA level with Roman names, but I will try to catch myself because you're confused enough as it is. Zeus, looking out from Ida, terribly angered, roused his messenger, Iris, of the golden wings, and said, away with you, turn them around, allow them no way through. It is not well that we should come together in this battle, but if we do, I swear I shall hamstring their horses' legs, and toss the riders from their car. The chariot I'll break to pieces. Not in 10 long years will their concussions from that lightning stroke be healed. Let Grey Eyes, that's Athena, realized the peril of going into battle with her father. Uh, I cannot be so furious with Hera, that's Juno. She balks me from sheer habit, say what I will. Uh, at his command, his emissary, Iris, who runs on the rainy wind, from Ida's range went up to grand Olympus. At the gate of that snow-craggy mountain, when she met them, that's the two goddesses, she held them back and spoke the word of Zeus. But notice she adds some things. Where are you going? Have you lost your minds? I don't remember Zeus saying that. The son of Kronos does not countenance aid to the Argives, that's the Greeks. Here is the penalty he threatens to impose and will impose. Your horses he will cripple, first of all, then toss you both out of the chariot and break it into pieces. Not in 10 years can what you suffer from that lightning stroke be healed. So, Grey Eyes, you may learn the peril of doing battle with your father. With Hera he cannot be so furious. Her habit is to balk him, say what he will. But as for you, you are a brazen bitch, and if you dare to lift your towering spear against him. So they've got Iris a little bit angry, a little bit annoyed, maybe a little bit afraid. Zeus's anger is notoriously indiscriminate. That is just a wonderfully human scene, despite the fact that none of the characters in it are human. I freely lifted it for Troy War. That threat, particularly the duration of the threat, when I have Juno, the queen of the gods, erupt into a visit on Achilles' mother, who doesn't want him to go to war. his mother is divine. She's a low-grade nymph, and she wants to save him from war because she has a feeling he'll die if he goes to war. But Juno wants everybody to go to war, no exceptions, especially not divine Get. And she shows up. She appears in the dwelling place of Achilles' mother, and is just the gods in Troy War are not particularly scrupulously human. They are often bulging or just coruscating with energy. They're often not hominin in any way. And when Juno is storming and threatening Achilles' mother says, if she strikes me when she's this close, I'll be 1,000 years healing. And I stole that directly from Homer. And that's great fun. With the gods and goddesses temporarily removed from the action, we're going to see that is not going to last. The humans are allowed to do a lot more. Spears and arrows fly. There is a single combat between Hector, the great prince of the Trojans, and the larger Ajax. The Greeks have two Ajaxes, and one is much bigger than the other, a giant among the Greek warriors. There's also a beautifully sad ceasefire where both armies are allowed to go out onto the field and collect their dead. It's a wonderful moment. Fitzgerald does it really well. We're told that Priam orders his soldiers not to cry out, not to make any noise when they're collecting the mangled bodies of their friends and wiping off the gore. They bring out cleansing apparatus in order to clean the gore before they bring the bodies to the funeral pyre. There's also a strange scene in here. It's often left out, or once upon a time when it was possible to edit the Iliad, when it was possible to put out an abridged Iliad, this scene would often be just completely excised from the work. Not only because it doesn't affect the action in any way, but also because when you look at it, especially when you look at the Greek, it doesn't always look like it belongs in the book. And that is a weird night raid that Diomedes and Ulysses, or Diomedes and Odysseus conduct on the Trojan camp, specifically in order to question a wretched Trojan, basically grill him for any inside information that he has. This wretched Trojan tells them King Rhesus and his men and their horses have just arrived to reinforce the city. And I can be more use to you than this. Please don't kill me. And they assure him, Ulysses assures him that they will not kill them, but then they do. They execute him. It's a moment singularly without honor. The kind of honor that is trumpeted in the rest of this book is just absent. They have a helpless prisoner whose safety they have guaranteed, and they just execute him. They just lop his head off. And then they conduct a raid on the newly arrived King Rhesus and his men who are asleep and murder them all. And then they go back to the camp. No, nothing more really is said about it. It doesn't really seem to matter. And it jars with the rest of the book, so it's often left out. Not anymore, of course. People do. Well, actually, no. Don't I remember correctly? Well, I'll have to check this. I seem to remember there was a very prominent English language translation of the Iliad that was complete in every other way. I think this was just a few years ago, maybe inside of 10 years ago. It was complete in every other way except it left the night raid out. And a whole bunch of reviewers commented on that. I don't really care one way or another. I would care about a lot of other things before I would care about that. But if you're reading along with us, it's probably going to strike you as a little anonymous. What is this thing doing here? You know, why are these characters acting this way? Ulysses, maybe he seems to be the most intellectual and the least tub-thumpingly moral of any of the Greeks. But Diomedes doesn't seem like the kind of character who would countenance killing a helpless spy, a helpless prisoner, much less killing warriors in their sleep. And yet he does. So, but one way or another, those are some of the highlights. I could talk forever about what's going on in these books, but we're going to move right on. We're going to move right on. It's a great pleasure to be reading the Fitzgerald Iliad so slowly, so contemplatively with someone else. This is a great joy. So Matthew and I are going to continue. We'll do the next 6 books for next weekend. I'm really hoping that I can make a video on the weekend instead of late. And I'm hoping that this video comes through. I'm hoping that it works, that it looks okay, that it sounds okay. It's going to have to do for today. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. But I'll be back if I can. Thank you, BookTube.